This particular piece of work I saw in Greenwich last summer, and without giving you a review or a preview, on paper it just doesn't work. It shouldn't work. All right. This extraordinary woman went to interview many important war correspondents and put it to music and developed a song cycle, which I saw underground in I can't remember where now, underground in Greenwich, and it was a transformative experience for me about an approach, another artistic strategy, and that's what one of the themes of this symposium is: how artists intervene in the political, how artists engage in a commemorative action, what, if any, responsibilities does an artist have when it comes to that. And we've seen and heard many examples of that over the last day and a half, and this is another example of an artistic strategy. But Helen Chadwick, is an extraordinary artist, an artist really well known, and an artist that I was humbled to meet for the first time, and we're thrilled that she's making her debut on the Abbey stage. So I have just a couple of very quick questions to ask Helen. Yeah. This is Helen. Welcome, Helen. And then I'll exit, and then we'll hear an extract from the song section. So, Helen, the provenance of this.
How did it come to be? Yeah. So it came about that I'd made another show based on interviews. So this whole thing that you're going to see and hear is based on interviews with war correspondents. And I'd made another project based on interviews with people where I live in East London, an area of a lot of migrancy, a lot of movement, people staying for a few days, a few months, a few years. People who are born in South London as opposed to in North London, or in Kurdistan, or in Ireland. My immediate neighbour lives in Ireland 25 years, and she still feels that she's an outsider where I live. So that show was all around that. And I've been working with a choreographer director called Steven Hoggett. So the theatre folk amongst you will know him from Frantic Assembly. And I wanted to work with him again. So really I just thought, I need another idea. Mm-hmm. And then I met a photographer who had photographed in the first Chechen war in the early 90s. And I was about to go to Georgia, and he said, come to my house and have a look at my photographs of Georgia. And when I got to his house, he got from upstairs, we had a cup of tea and some PG tips and a piece of cake, and he went upstairs and he brought down these large A4 photographs, beautiful photographs of Tbilisi, and when he got to the bottom of them, underneath were these devastating photographs of Chechnya, of Grozny, which was so badly bombed, one can't compare wars, but it was much worse bombing there than in Sarajevo in terms of number of shells. And there was something for me in these devastating and extraordinary photographs, and then this very normal man, there was no sign of the experience that he'd had in the man and these photographs, and that just stayed with me. So then I said to Stephen, what do you think if we start interviewing war correspondents? And that's how the thing happened.
Okay, and on that note...
I'm seeing somebody looking like this, that's why I'm talking loud. Can you basically hear me? Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
On that note, I leave you.
Thank you. So, we're going to, I'll say very briefly something about the company here. We have the show that we mentioned, and then we have two performances which are influenced by war, if you like. So we have an outdoor piece, 23 minutes long, got to be entertaining, all singing, all dancing, sounds even more unlikely than this show, and it's based on the testimony of a Colombian woman speaking about the story of stepping on a landmine and losing part of her leg, and then what transpired after that. And then about 6 years ago we started on this show, and we've interviewed about 30 correspondents. We started in London because that's where we're based, and then gradually interviewed people, somebody from Italy, somebody in America, and then we went to Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, and we interviewed 15 correspondents working on Chechnya, on the early 90s war that they had with over one disputed territory, Abkhazia, which is now Russian controlled. And then they also had a war in 2008. And so we were speaking to a mixture of photographers, reporters, some people who were working independently under their own, desperately trying to get hold of a camcorder so they could report war in their own country, and then other people working for the BBC or Associated Press who were supported by a big agency and might be flying into an area for a limited amount of time. One of the people that we interviewed was Chris Steven, who is the Guardian correspondent for Libya. And late on in the rehearsals, I said, come and watch a run. We were still kind of putting the show together, changing the order, but we had a rough sense of the whole thing. So the complete show is choreographed, stage, tables, laptops, iPhones, angle poise lamps, movement, etc. And so he came and watched a very rough run of that. And about 10 minutes after the beginning, he left. And I thought, my life's over, He hated it. We've done that. All I wanted to do was to pay tribute, and we've just, he hates it, and he's gone, and all of that work was worth nothing. And then about 15 minutes later, he came back. It turned out he'd taken his sister to the bus stop. And so then he stayed, and afterwards he said to us, you guys are like those TV guys I've worked with, and you two, you're like that person I worked with in Bosnia. And he somehow seemed to recognize the people in it. And since then, he and some of the other correspondents have helped us a great deal, sometimes joining in Q&A sessions, sometimes speaking, being interviewed for us, and so on. One of the stories that Chris told us was that he was sitting outside at the end of a day's work, having a beer, and suddenly, pew! A sniper's bullet. He moved out of sight. And the next day he went to a neighbouring village and he was visiting them. And he was introduced to a guy, and the person who introduced him said, this is a sniper, but today's his day off. And he said, you weren't shooting down below yesterday, were you? And he said, oh yeah, I was. And he said, you nearly killed me. And the sniper said, I think we should have a drink. You should drink to how much I am a bad shot. All the songs that you're about to hear have lyrics from these interviews with correspondents that we made over these 6 years. And the first song that we're going to do comes from a very simple question we asked everybody, which is, what kit do you take with you? What are the things that you actually need in your pack?
Pouches, belt, spare memory card, notebook, pencil, pen, money, sun cream, journalism ID, Lucky Charms, wet wipes, body armor, helmet, spare lens cloth, passport. Pouches, belt, spare memory card, laces, notebook, waistcoat, pencil, pen, full of pockets, money, belt, sun cream, cash, journalism ID, hard currency, Lucky Charms, hat, wet wipes, comb, body armor, dictaphone, helmet, camera, spare lens, torch, lens cloth, medical kit, passport. I pack for a war as I pack for a holiday. That's half the clothes and twice the money that I think I'm going to need. I pack for a war as I pack for a holiday. That's half the clothes and twice the money that I think I'm going to need. Pouches, belt, spare memory card, laces, notebook, waistcoat, pencil, pen, full of pockets, money, belt, sun cream, cash, journalism ID, hard currency, Lucky Charms, hat, wet wipes, comb, body armor, dictaphone, helmet, camera, spare lens, torch, lens cloth, medical kit, passport.
And another one of the... I decided to try and stop you clapping. Of course, in the show there's no clapping, everything's seamless. But I missed, I failed. So all the correspondents whose lyrics you will hear are living very different ages. So one of them got the job as Guardian correspondent for Egypt at the age of 23, and then the revolution happened. So he was reporting on that between the ages of 23 and 26. And then we also interviewed one correspondent in his 60s looking back on a career of trying to make a difference and wondering, the world is still so violent. The only person who is no longer alive, who we didn't interview, but we kindly have permission to include his words today, is Tim Hetherington. Tim Hetherington was a magnificent photographer, and he died in Misrata in Libya, on the job as it were. And he is most well known for a documentary which he and an American filmmaker called Sebastian Yerger made, called Restrepo, which is about when they went to live in Afghanistan for a year in an American army outpost with a bunch of lads, poor families from America, who were made into an army troop and were living in this extremely isolated situation. And hello. Hey. And the most famous photographs which Tim took were that he photographed the young men when they were asleep. And Sebastian said to him, "What are you doing? You know, that's not them at work." And Tim said, "You don't get it, do you?" And in fact, these photographs revealed the vulnerability of these young men who were just out there because they'd taken a job, because they could earn some money doing it. And they were not out there to kill people, they were out there to survive and protect each other. And Tim talked about how reporting on wars is not about bang bang, it's not about hunting the gun battles, it's about reporting on the human story.
Bang bang is not the story.
The story is the human face behind a war. So in the worst of moments, you see that people are still human despite all.
Bang bang is not the story. The story is the human nature of us all.
What is happening? What's happening that I don't see?
Are there any prisoners?
Where are they? How have they been treated?
How did the war start?
Who's responsible?
Who's responsible for this massacre? How could it end? I don't believe in bystander journalism. I will be a candle holder. We have a moral responsibility. I don't believe in bystander journalism. I will be a candle holder. We have a moral responsibility.
Impartiality. So I grew up imagining that journalists have to be objective. It's their job to tell both sides of the stories in as fair a way as they can. And of course there is absolute truth in that. But in interviewing people, we discovered that no, they're not impartial. What they care about is those who are suffering in war. What they care about are the women and children who are displaced, or the men who are injured. What they care about is the citizens. They're not telling the story of the perpetrators, I mean, they are needing to tell that, but what they really want to get out is the human story, because that is the thing that might change the course of the war if they're getting that story out. One of the people that I was lucky enough to interview is an Italian journalist called Giuliana Screnna, and I was working on a theatre project in Italy with a young theatre director. We were in the mountains of Abruzzo. We were listening to the songs, the argument songs of women and men in their 80s and 90s, a dying tradition of arguments. And we were then teaching that to the younger people. This is myself, an Italian director and an Italian musician, and then getting the young people to write their own argument songs. And I told Antonella, the only person I wanted to interview was this Italian journalist, Giuliana Screnna, excuse me, who had been in Fallujah in Iraq. As an independent journalist, she'd gone there, incredibly dangerous thing to do, to tell about the carpet bombing by the Americans of Fallujah, to tell the Fallujah story. And while she was there, she was taken hostage. 4 weeks later, the Italian Secret Service rescued her, and the people who'd taken her hostage said to her, "You know the Americans want you dead, don't you?" And as they were driving away, I don't know whether there was ransom money involved, of course that's not advertised, the car in which they were escaping was shot at, and she was wounded in the lung, and the Italian Secret Service man died in that attack. And so she came to write a book called Friendly Fire, which is how I knew about her, about the fact that she couldn't she couldn't get to the bottom of that story. Nobody would tell anything about whether they were shot at to be killed or whether it was friendly fire. And one of those chance events, you're in a theatre project with these women singing, and suddenly the director says, "Oh, by the way, Giuliana Screnna, she's a communist, she's coming down to speak in the next town about 40 minutes' time, and you're going to have a coffee with her and you can arrange to interview her later."
I have never been impartial. I am on the side of those who suffer. What shots to send and what not to send, as I could put them all in danger. I can deal with it when I don't sleep, but when I sleep, I can't stop falling. I remember those people filming their grief, and I feel still so ashamed. The harder part was afterwards, when the shelling stopped and I came back home. I have never been impartial. I am on the side of those who suffer.
You keep telling yourself, well, wouldn't it be good if I could do something to help this person? Rather than write
write about it and hope to inspire the world to get involved and help out. But that's not going to help somebody who's bleeding or dying. But that's not going to help somebody who's bleeding or dying. What do you do? You keep telling yourself, well, wouldn't it be good if I could do something to help this person? Rather than photograph it and hope to inspire the world to get involved and help out. But that's not going to help somebody who's bleeding or dying. But that's not going to help somebody who's bleeding or dying.
I think 10 years ago I was a lot more insensitive to the danger. It's only now that I realize what can go wrong might go wrong, does go wrong, and putting myself into danger also puts all of my team into danger. So I am putting the lives of others in danger, in danger, in danger.
The best war reporter is the one who gets out alive to tell the story.
The world is not dangerous because of those who do harm, but because of those who look at it without doing anything. I think 10 years ago I was a lot more insensitive to the dangers. It's only now that I realize what can go wrong might go wrong, does go wrong. And putting myself into danger also puts all of my team into danger. So I am putting the lives of others in danger, in danger, in danger. First when I do a story, I look at risk and potential reward. So what am I going to gain from putting myself and my team into danger?
I can't go only to countries where it is safe. It is our work that is dangerous.
I think 10 years ago I was a lot more insensitive to the dangers. It's only now that I realize what can go wrong might go wrong, does go wrong. Putting myself into danger also puts all of my team into danger. So I am putting the lives of I was in danger, in danger. First when I do any story, I look at risk and potential reward. So what am I going to gain from putting myself and my team into danger?
I've got a timer here because yeah, we're doing great. Yeah, I'm just making the timer visible because there's a setup for She Stoops to Conquer tonight later. We've got lots of time. So one of the obvious questions that we asked them was around what's been your experience of censorship, and people say that the last war that you could report as an independent in the way that we perhaps still think that war correspondents work was Vietnam, and that since 9/11 everything changed, and then again with the North African revolutions everything changed again, and now more recently still more, so that somebody like Martin Bell could go out to a war wearing a white suit and nobody would shoot at him. Whereas as we know with somebody like Mary Colvin, that it's no longer safe, that people are even targeted specifically because they are journalists. And then there are also all the other changes around pieces of kit, like I have in front of me, that people can film what's going on. And so the relationship between war correspondents and local information has changed as well. So the whole thing has shifted. And so in some senses, the older correspondents that we interviewed, we were talking to a profession that no longer exists in the way that it did. Kate Holt, a photographer who we interviewed, she was embedded in Afghanistan, and the subject of embedding came very strongly in this subject of censorship. And she was asked, you know, obviously bring your bulletproof kit. And she thought, well, bulletproof underwear, now that would be something. And because she had to wear such specific garments for her job, the only thing she took care of to give herself a sense of being nicely turned out was that she would go and buy the highest quality knickers in the best shops. She'd really spend her money there. And at some point she was bending down to photograph in Afghanistan and reveal some of these knickers to a general who's standing behind her. And the general said to her, "I think you could wear more culturally appropriate underwear."
News management. The idea of embedding a journalist with the army is actually very sophisticated news management by the military. News. The idea of embedding a journalist with the army is actually very sophisticated news management by the military.
Sometimes to be silent is to lie. Sometimes to be silent is
We
to
are
lie.
not allowed
Sometimes to be
to
silent
call
is to
it
lie.
a
Sometimes to
war.
be silent is to lie.
It's a counterinsurgency. We are not allowed
Sometimes to be
call
silent is to
it
lie.
a
Sometimes to be
war.
silent is to lie.
It's a don't ask, don't tell policy.
I'm just going to tell you something about that one. This last line, which is also Kate Holt, it's a don't ask, don't tell policy, was reporting on a story which had to get told more than once, which was a story in West Africa of young women being shipped in from another country to work as prostitutes for UN soldiers. And that went on for a long time, and Kate even says not everything has changed. It's still a don't ask, don't tell policy. We reported it as we saw it, and we tried to undo the lies being shoved out by the military day after day, 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 day after day.
We reported it as we saw it, and we tried to undo the lies being shoved out by the military.
We will try to tell the truth. We are the only people who try to tell the truth.
We will try to tell the truth. We are the only people who try to tell the truth. We will try to tell the truth. We are the only people who try to tell the truth. We will try to tell the truth. We are the only people who try to tell the truth.
You won't hear the truth from governments. You won't hear it from the military.
You won't hear the truth
from governments.
Hear the
You
truth.
won't hear it from the
Hear the
military.
truth. We will try to tell the truth. We are the only people who try to tell the truth. We will try to tell the truth. We are the only people who try to tell the truth.
We reported
We
it as we saw
reported
it,
it as we
and
saw
we tried
it,
to undo
and
the
tried to
lies
undo
being
the
shoved
lies
out
being
by
shoved
the
out
military.
by the
We
military.
reported
We reported it as we saw it, and we tried to undo the lies being shoved out by the military. Censorship is now called spin. Spin, spin, spin. It's a new word. It's a shorter word. It's not censorship. It's spin. Advanced censorship.
The perhaps most sensitive question that we asked, which people talked about anyway, but it's not something you necessarily want to delve into in an obvious way, was what the effect of this work has on people. And this was tremendously varied. So somebody like Martin Bell said, you know, I was lucky I didn't suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Other people, they can work for years in wars, and then much later, a bit like we're seeing with soldiers, that the post-traumatic stress disorder can arrive years after you come back from a conflict zone. You may think you've got away with it, as it were, and then it can come up later. When we were in Georgia, we were interviewing people who had not chosen to be war correspondents. And one of them was a wonderful woman called Margarita Aflediani. And she had reported in 2008 on the war, which was over a disputed territory between Russia and Georgia, somewhere a bit north of Gori, where Stalin is born. And she was an independent. She went out there in her car with her precious equipment, her pass, her journalist pass, her press pass, her camcorder, a notebook, a dictaphone. And while she was there, a bunch of lads, a kind of gang in this no man's land between these two countries, surrounded her car, got her out the car, and stuck a gun at her head. And for 15 minutes, she didn't know whether she would die or live. And she was also desperately trying to get her camcorder off and give me my camcorder, because she knew that without equipment, she couldn't work. And after 15 minutes where they were jostling, threatening, they drove off with the car, which was what they want, and they didn't kill her. And she was really shocked about the fact that they hadn't killed her, and she couldn't understand why they hadn't. And for a while it was very difficult to write. She would find herself at her desk, and she would have a piece of paper, she was trying to write something, and then she would scrunch the paper up and throw it into a metal waste paper bin, one of those metal ones that you get in primary schools. And suddenly the round circle of the waste paper bin was to her the barrel of the gun. And she said, I found myself looking down the barrel again at eternity.
There is a danger. You become completely battle-hardened and uncaring. I found quite the opposite happened to me, and I became a battle-softened veteran. There is a danger. You become completely battle-hardened and uncaring. I found quite the opposite happened to me, and I became a battle-softened veteran. And I really had to work quite hard to keep my own opinions out of it. I really had to work quite hard to keep my own opinions out of it. Whoa, 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 whoa.
The hue can take only so much. It can affect anyone. Emotional exhaustion. It's best described as a bruising of the mind.
Don't let it touch you, and don't get too close. Don't let it touch you, and don't get too close. Don't let it touch you, and don't get too close. Don't let it touch you, and don't get too close. Don't let it touch you, and don't get too close. Don't let it touch you, and don't get too close. The human frame can take only so much. It can affect anyone. Emotional exhaustion. It's best described as a bruising of the mind.
Everything stays broken, everything stays broken, everything stays broken. It never gets better, never gets better, never gets better. Everything stays broken, everything stays broken, everything stays broken, never gets better, never gets better, never gets better, never gets better. Everything stays broken, everything stays broken, everything stays broken. It never gets better, never gets better, never gets better. I don't know, but there's a sense of, in me at least, a sense of sadness and frustration. Everything stays broken, everything stays broken, everything stays broken. It never gets better, never gets better, never gets better. A frustration that you would like to see yourself having done something to fix things, like a handyman who finds something broken and puts it back together, and it works somehow. But in this business, everything stays broken, everything stays broken, everything stays broken. It never gets better, never gets better, never gets better. Everything stays broken, everything stays broken, everything stays broken, everything stays broken. Never gets better, never gets better, never gets better.
So that lyric comes from the American Larry James. And Larry worked in Liberia, and when there was the dictator Samuel Doe in power, and there were terrible atrocities happening. And the Observer editor in Liberia was a man called Kenneth Best, a man who's still alive and who has kindly agreed for me to interview him, though we haven't done it yet. And he asked Kenneth why he was publishing the stories he was publishing, because Kenneth was daring enough, brave enough, courageous enough to report what was going on, which was extremely dangerous to him and to all the staff at the newspaper, something that we've... And when he asked that question to Kenneth, this was the answer that Kenneth gave to the question, why are you daring to publish these stories?
I keep hoping that someday, if we keep telling the truth, it will be better for us all. I keep hoping that someday, if we keep telling the truth, it will be better for us all. I keep hoping that someday, if we keep telling the truth,
It will
it will be better for us all. I keep hoping that someday, if we keep telling the truth, it will be better for us all. I keep hoping that someday.
So to finish, this morning Diana was speaking and she reminded us of a Brecht quote. And when we were making this performance, I set that Brecht quote as a song which we were going to have in the show, and we actually cut it. So when we heard Diana speak this morning, we said, oh, why don't we sing that song? Can we remember how it goes? So we're going to leave you with a bit of Brecht.